I think I speak for the entirety of the Jewish community, both inside and outside of Australia, to say that we are scared after the attack yesterday. The attack, which was carried out on Bondi Beach, killed 16 innocent lives, carried out by a father son duo, both radical Islamists, to kill as many Jews as possible. But they weren't only targeting Jews. They were targeting Christians, they were targeting Muslims, they were targeting normal people that walked down the street in Australia on that day. The government of Australia is directly complicit in this attack. About 6 months ago, I wrote an article discussing the situation in Australia, where there are severed ties with the nation of Israel for now what seems to be ever since October 7th. The Albanese government has chosen to recognize a Palestinian state, a state that does not exist on the map, over supporting a country with Western values, the only Jewish state in the Middle East, and a country that supports democracy. Rather than supporting Israel, Australia chose to support radical Islamists, Hamas. They did this by declaring their support for Hamas with the recognition of the Palestinian state, and they do this now by covering this situation up. When I was covering this attack yesterday, or this night, last night, just a few hours ago, there was a horrific realization that took place, and that's the fact that there's a very limited amount of coverage of this attack in Australia. Most mainstream media did not even call this a terrorist attack. This attack was deemed a terrorist attack hours after it was actually committed. There was a clear cover up by the Australian government to try and make them seem good, make this attack seem so unprecedented. But look, if we have a country that actively recognizes radical Islamists, if we have a country that supports radical Islamists by recognizing them as a state, then that same country will have radical Islamists come to it. And when it does, this is the result. So, look, Australia got what it did to itself. There's really no one else to blame for this other than the Australian government. And this wasn't a security breach or anything. This was a particular coordinated plan by the Australian government. And that doesn't necessarily mean, again, that they had to pull the trigger. But it does mean that their policies, their structure of government, their support, again, for radical Islamists over pro-democracy, pro-Western, Judeo-Christian values shows in this attack. This attack would not have happened if Australia didn't allow, for the millions of radical Islamists to come into its country with open borders. It would not have happened if the Albanese government chosen to stronghold their stance in support of Israel. Sure, you don't have to support all of Israel's policies. I don't think that's a fair ask from everyone. However, you do have to support pro-Western states around the world, and Australia failed to do so. Not only that, but the Australian government was directly complicit over the past few months in refusing to fight against anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has been an issue in Australia for decades, but after the October 7th attacks, almost immediately, it has gotten worse and worse. We have seen posters in the exact same location as this Hanukkah party actually took place, basically calling for the end of Israel, calling to globalize the Intifada. And now, this is what globalizing the Intifada looks like. Just a few minutes ago, I watched some horrific footage of people in Amsterdam yelling to kill all the Jews at a concert, at a Hanukkah party concert. This comes after 2 U.S. Army soldiers were killed in Syria, after there have been several incidents in the United States regarding anti-Semitic attacks, after we have seen under the former administration, under the Biden administration, several college campuses, most college campuses in the United States, carrying anti-Semitic, anti-American, and anti-Israel protests. So who is surprised that the Western world is turning against Jews right now? Look, it doesn't start at Jews, and that's what people have to understand. Sure, as a Jewish person, I am very afraid now to, go to the airport during Christmas break, to travel, to go to conventions, to go to events, just because of my religion. But again, these people don't only target Jews, they target anyone who isn't themselves. When you watch that video of the horrific video of the shooting, everyone saw what actually took place. It was two shooters shooting in a crowd, shooting people who just got out of their car, shooting people who were just walking on the street, not knowing their religion. One of the men that actually tackled one of the shooters was Muslim. He's a hero, regardless of his religion. This is another point I want to bring up. We have to stop living in this binary where all we see is religion. This comes on both sides. It doesn't matter what religion is what. It matters how radicalized and how evil a person is. The people who carried out these attacks are radical Islamists. That doesn't make all Muslims bad, and that doesn't mean that the man who tackled this radical Islamist, who himself was Muslim, wasn't a hero. I wanted to say that because I have seen a lot of posts on social media claiming that because this guy is a Muslim who tackled him, he's not a hero. No, that doesn't play a role. He is a hero. He should be given the Nobel Peace Prize or some big prize to show the gratitude. And he's definitely welcome in the United States. The issue that Australia had was that it allowed millions of immigrants into its country without any vetting processes, without any screening processes. It allowed them because Australia fell victim to the leftist ideology that it is okay to bring anyone you want into this country as long as it's politically convenient. That's what Australia did, and this is the result of it. When you don't vet your immigrants from other countries, and this was an immigrant, these people were immigrants from Pakistan. When you don't vet them, when you don't check for signs of terrorism, something like this ought to happen, and it will. And it did. Now, Australia has one of the strictest gun laws in the entire world. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to even bring a gun in Australia. Still, this attack was carried out. Very similar to the situation yesterday that happened at Brown, which again is situated in Rhode Island, one of the strictest states with the highest gun laws. Brown University is a gun-free zone. Obviously, still that attack was carried out with guns. It has nothing to do about gun laws anymore. Gun laws do not protect people. They do not cause any sort of safety measure. They, if anything, put people in danger. If this same attack were to happen at Tel Aviv, at a Tel Aviv beach, it would have been stopped in less than 30 seconds. In Tel Aviv, people there, everyone carries a gun. Everyone should carry a gun because most people are former IDF soldiers, they served in the military, they have their own personal weapons. Australia, though, in this situation, was a total failure when it comes to law enforcement. The law enforcement had to barricade themselves against the shooter. They didn't have any weapons at first to fire against the shooter. They waited around 10 minutes for the shooter to actually continue its attack before finally police officers were able to initiate. I mean, a civilian came to tackle one of the shooters before a police officer actually did it themselves. Keep in mind that the closest police station to this was around 3 minutes away. Now, this is a tragic attack where 16 people died. But whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, this is not only a threat to the Jewish community. It is a threat to the entire Western world. It goes to show that when you actually follow through with these crazy leftist ideologies, when you follow through with allowing everyone to come into your country, when you follow through with radical gun laws that don't allow anyone, including police, to have guns and protect themselves, and when you follow through into accepting radical Islam, accepting the radical Hamas terrorist organizations over peaceful, pro-democracy, pro-Western ideals, you will have an attack like this. The senior Israeli government officials have warned the Jewish community abroad that more attacks like this are coming in the very, very near future. They sent a similar warning to Australia, where they warned the Australian Prime Minister that they had intelligence that a planned and coordinated attack was in the mist. This was just a few weeks ago. Clearly, the Australian government didn't listen and didn't take that request seriously. Now, this is the result. Israel has by far the best security intelligence agency in the world. It's Mossad. Better than the CIA. The CIA actually relies on Israel much for its, Middle East projects. However, that means that when the intel agency of Israel gives you a warning, you take it. And Israel has warned Jews around the world, Jews in India, Jews in the United States, Jews in Europe, to make sure to protect themselves, make sure that they are celebrating their Hanukkah parties in secure locations. How crazy is that? I mean, it's almost as if we're in the 1930s before the Holocaust, where Jews have to be warned to celebrate their parties in secure locations. It's not a state that I want to live in. It's not a state that any Jew around the world wants to live in. But again, the most important point out of all of this is that this is not an attack on Jews. This is an attack on Western ideals. You have to understand that these terrorists will start with attacking Jews, but they will move on to attack Christians. They will move on to attack their own Muslims. They will move on to attack every religion that isn't themselves. Radical Islam, radical ideologies exactly like this, even in Pakistan, have been the cause to millions of deaths in India. We saw it earlier this year where Pakistani men actually infiltrated in a terrorist attack in India. It's, again, a threat to every single religion that isn't radical Islam. That's what everyone has to understand. Now, there's a lot of things we can do about this, but the number one thing that we can do is denounce radical Islam. We cannot allow for radical Islam to be accepted in Western society any longer. As the Australian government has done, they recognized the Palestinian state. They allowed for Hamas, a radical Islamist fundamentalist group that is a registered terrorist organization under almost every single country in the world. They allowed for Hamas to gain self-determination. They rewarded Hamas before they rewarded a pro-democracy state. If we continue to do this, this is what's going to happen. Now, this is the first of many, many attacks that we should expect. As I mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, there was footage released of a crowd yelling, "Kill all Jews" in Amsterdam at a Hanukkah party concert. This is what's going to happen everywhere. We're going to see this in the United States. We're going to see this in Europe, and there's nothing we can do about it. Moving forward, the way to protect our country and really the world against this is to prevent immigrants who are coming from third world countries, who are coming from radical fundamentalist countries, to be able to enter our country without a vetting process. That's what happened in Australia. That's what happened in the US under the Biden administration. Whether we're in the right step to take action against all third world immigration, that's a question. But we are definitely in the right shoes right now to take action against making sure that immigrants are vetted. We need vetting processes for all immigrants, and definitely from immigrants that come from radical fundamentalist countries and have ties to radical fundamentalist groups. We need it because if we don't have that now, then we're going to have a very similar situation in Australia. Now, obviously, the United States has some of the best intelligence in the world. We're very thankful for that. So an attack to this scale is very rare to be carried out in the United States. It doesn't mean it's not possible, but it does mean that it's much more rare for it to be carried out here than it is in Australia, where, again, it's a gun-free state. So according to them, no attack like this could ever happen. The thing I want to reiterate is that Australia knew this attack would take place. the Israeli intelligence force gave them the information of a attack very similar to this one, of a planned attack taking place just a few weeks ago. They ignored that information. Now, the divide on the right, where we see two different crowds with pro-Israel support, anti-Israel support, that divide on the right is irrelevant. All that's relevant is that the right as a whole is pro-Western ideals, pro-Judeo-Christian values, pro-America. In order to maintain the Western world as a pro-American place, we need to make sure we speak out against radical Islam. We need to make sure we prevent any further terrorist attacks from actually taking place. And the only way to do that is to check who is coming into our country, prevent any radical Islam from coming into our country, and to make sure we are very careful about the way we are positioning our party. And the reason I say to be careful about the way we're positioning our party is because we have people like Valentina Gomez, who is a total bigot, a total racist, anti-American. She is under the impression that all Muslims are dirty. All Muslims want to kill everyone. All Muslims are horrible people. That's not a way to position our party, and that's not what anyone should say. The man who tackled the shooter was Muslim himself. The man who tackled the shooter is a great man. He's a hero. So we can't generalize under the condition of all Muslims. It's third world countries, it's radical fundamentalist groups that are the threat. It's radical fundamentalist groups that pose a financial burden also in the United States, as we saw just last week with the ridiculous amount of Somali fraud being uncovered, with 76 out of the 77 people arrested being a part of the same Somali organization, with the Somali organization being implicated in significant fraud, being on welfare, taking $2.8 billion away from taxpayer funds each year. That is a very big concern. America first doesn't mean America only, but it does mean that the people we let into our country need to benefit our country. We should not be letting people in just because of their poor economic situation, just because their country that they are currently living in is unstable. We do have a wonderful refugee process, and that should maintain in action. But just because you come from a third world country does not mean that you apply or you are accepted into refugee status. Third world immigration is the biggest threat to the Western world today. And that is what we really have to minimize. Third world immigration is to blame for all of these attacks. It's to blame for all of this fraud. And don't look at me, just look at the numbers. The numbers show how bad third world immigration is. Almost all of the fraud implicated on immigrants comes from third world immigration. I mean, the left always uses the talking point that immigrants commit less crime than U.S. citizens, and that is 100% true until you look at third world immigrants particularly. Then that statistic changes completely. If we look at it, the Somali community in Minnesota is around 107,000 people. Around 62,000 of those 107,000 are on welfare, meaning that they receive welfare status. They make up for 12% of the total Minnesotan population on welfare, even though they make up less than 1.5% of the actual population in Minnesota. That just goes to show that third world immigration is not beneficial under any circumstance in the United States. We do not need third world immigrants. It hurts our country, and our country is not in the place right now to give free handouts to people. We're in the place right now to accept people that benefit our country and are immigrants who can help us continue to become the most successful, the greatest country on earth. If we allow for third world immigrants, if we allow for all immigrants, if we fall into this leftist ideology, we will become what Australia was today. And no one wants that. Now, as I reiterated before, this is the first of many attacks. It will happen again. It will happen to every single nation that allows for third world immigration. It will happen to every single nation that rewards radical Islamist fundamentalist groups like Hamas. It will happen to every single nation that chooses to ignore Israel as a democratic, as a pro-American, pro-democracy state. You can be against sending aid to Israel, but you cannot be against Israel. You cannot be against Israel and be pro-American because, again, Israel is the only pro-American state in the Middle East. Now, I've been mostly silent on this, but I want to address a lot of points made by people like Tucker Carlson, even Nick Fuentes. I don't believe Tucker Carlson is anti-Semitic. Nick Fuentes is a different story, but Tucker Carlson, I don't believe he is. But clearly there's some willful ignorance there. If anything, this attack showed you that this issue of Israel's support goes far deeper than just aid to Israel, than just wasting money on Israel. Israel's support is support against Islamic fundamentalist groups. It's support against terrorism. Mossad, as I mentioned, is the top of the line intelligence agency. The CIA uses Mossad for intelligence. If that's not a reason to support them, then look at what Israel did with Australia. Look at what Israel did with every single country that had a similar attack. Israel's always the first to warn. Now, the first step, again, that we need to take is to make sure we clean up our immigration system to prevent third world immigrants. But we also need to make sure that as a Jew, if you are Jewish, you don't make this about yourself. This is not just about Jews. This attack was a representation of the threat Islamic fundamentalism poses to the entire Western world. And if we are not clear about that distinction, if we are not clear that this threat is not for just Jews, but it is for everyone, then we will not be successful in the fight against terrorism. The most important point, though, is that we have to prevent anything like this from happening again with making sure that people around us are safe, with making sure that celebrations we have are, properly vetted, we have security, all of that stuff, which is common sense. But also, now may be a good time to question whether, you need a gun. Because if the situation in Australia showed you anything, it showed you that if a guy had a gun there, if a good Samaritan had a gun, these shooters would have taken out half as many people as they have. A gun would have saved lives in this situation. There is some truth to the fact that the shooters used pump-action shotguns, and for any of you not familiar with pump-action shotguns, they are they're an extremely unlikely source of firearm use for shootings like this. They have a very high spray range, which means that they're very inaccurate when you shoot them. They're very hard to reload. You have to reload them every single time after each individual shot, and they also jam very often. Clearly, that didn't stop the shooters from killing 16 people and injuring 29, but that did stop from further deaths. Evil people will do evil things, and that is the crux of the story. Gun laws are not going to protect anyone. Gun laws are only going to hurt people. In the United States as a whole, we have never seen a statistic that showed gun laws actually benefit Americans. The only statistics we have seen are that cities like Chicago, cities like Boston, cities like Portland, Oregon, which have the strictest gun laws in the country, are also the most violent. They also they contain the most gun deaths. And I want to also make this point clear. Mass shootings like this are very unlikely. They pose a significantly smaller threat to you than individualized shootings. Shootings where some random guy shoots 2 people on the street, which, barely even gets any media coverage. Those types of shootings are much more common. Those types of shootings are also much less covered. So, in those individualized shootings, a weapon, a personalized firearm, could actually significantly help you. There's no proper answer to this. This is a very scary situation. But again, if you take these 3 steps in making sure that our immigration system is fixed, making sure that we are ending third world immigration, if we protect our citizens by providing adequate security, adequate cameras, adequate, an end to this bureaucratic waste, and use that money towards actual spending that benefits the US citizens. And if we encourage firearm carrying, legal firearm carrying, then we actually might have a much safer country. I could only hope and I could only pray that this was the first attack. I mean, this was the last attack. But realistically, this is only the first attack, and there will be several more in the next coming days. This is, after all, the anniversary of Hamas. Hamas was created around, I believe it was 38 years ago. So, again, if you're Jewish, if you're not Jewish, it should be of concern. This attack should be of concern, and we should be paying attention to the media. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I know this episode was obviously not the same, but I thought it would be extremely important to point out these points that people are just ignoring. Because we can't talk about, this is not just about anti-Semitism. This is not just about, radical Islam or not radical Islam. These people would kill anyone who they came across. They were targeting Jews, but they were killing everyone. And that's the realistic story. So, yeah, guys, share your thoughts on what you think in the comments. Really, though, I really stress the Trump administration to end third world immigration, because that is a great threat to the United States.